than blacks brought to North America. And one of the cultures that I wanted to talk about in North America that was allowed to have more space than slaves on other plantations is the Gullah Gichee, if any of y'all are familiar with them. And they're out of South Carolina, Georgia, the islands that are out that way, Georgia Sea Islands. And they're known as the Gullah or the Gullah Gichee. And you have a Gichee River that runs through there. And the Gullah were another, group of black Africans brought here. But because of the climate and the environment in which they lived, they were allowed to maintain some of their practices. Yes, there was a Congolese influence in the 1700s, I think like 1740 or something like that, where there was this Congolese input that came in. But because of the islands and because of where they lived, during the hotter time of the year or the summer months, the people who owned them would leave and would just leave the care of these slaves to an overseer, which could have been one, who knows how many people, but definitely not what folks had in other plantations. So they were left to this kind of isolation. So the Gullah had this element of isolation that others didn't have, and so hence were able to develop in a way that was different than slaves in other plantations and in other regions and so forth. And so this has added to, yet another level of the hoodoo that they practice and that they know and what they're able to give to the tradition of hoodoo as a whole, because of the isolation, again, this element of isolation that allowed them to have the space to engage in things that others didn't. And one of the things that also supported the isolation that they had was because during the summer months, during the hotter months, they have all these mosquitoes that are out there. And these mosquitoes would spread malaria. And so because these mosquitoes were spreading malaria to those around, the landowner would be like, fuck this, I'm out of here. You there with the whip on the horse, yeah, you stick around and you deal with this. We're going to California to go watch the Emmys or some shit. So I don't even know if the Emmys happens during I'm just throwing that out there, right? And so, yeah, right. And so the mosquito actually becomes a totem for the Gullah Gichee. Why? Because it's spreading this malaria, causing these people to leave, giving them more space. And many Africans brought over, they have sickle cell. So when you have sickle cell anemia, you can't get malaria. So they were immune, number of them, enough of them.
That's interesting.
Yeah, from the disease that these mosquitoes were spreading. And so hence the mosquito becomes a protector of the Gullah Gichee.
I just always thought they were irritating. They're like little heroes.
Yeah. And
cool.
What a wonderful kind of irritation when you're on the other side of that.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's so irritating, it's caused all these people to leave, and to you now have a space damn near more to yourself.
Yeah.
Case of sickle cell.
And going back to etymology too, the word Gullah itself is implicit of where they come from, which is Angola.
So was it only certain tribes from certain areas that had sickle cell?
It's certain.
Or was it just sort of an African thing? Was it region-based?
Some of it would have been region-based depending on where all these Africans landed. So in this particular case, like the Gullah, they come from Angola. So you had this concentration of individuals coming from there that had this particular disease, you know, and then depending on how it spread even amongst them as well. But
So if my mother had sickle cell, it's probably the tribe that ended up in New Orleans that was somehow related to that.
or depending on how they traveled,
Mm-hmm.
you know, who connected with whom and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
So moving on from there, yeah, the last, so you have these kind of waves of people who were brought from the continent. And one of the main waves was between 1740 and 1780. You know, that's considered pretty much like the second, like, big wave, you know, of individuals brought over here. And it's from that particular period of 1740 to 1780 that we have so many other elements that are introduced into the lives of the Black Americans that are living here, and then so hence kind of infusing the practice of hoodoo that already be existent in some, you know, blueprint form. All these blacks that were brought here during those decades, they brought their knowledge with them, the ones that survived the trip, right? And then so hence this added to the knowledge in what will become hoodoo. And then after that you had another wave from around 1790 to 1799. And that brings more knowledge and so forth. And we have to keep in mind that when these Black Africans are brought over, they also bring knowledge and wisdom with them that helps clarify knowledge that had been here but was lost. You know, they fill in gaps, you know, things that people had totally forgotten the reasons behind. They were able to then clarify and explain and so forth. You know, so with these waves of Black Africans brought here, they're also bringing with them this information that helps people regain knowledge that was lost, clear up confusion, or help reinforce and give the real meaning and definition behind some of the things that they may be doing or they may have off and so on. And then the last one, of course, being 1804, which was with the Haitian Revolution, was with Toussaint Louverture. That's when the slaves came from there, from Haiti and Santo Domingo, which is now known as the Dominican Republic. And that's when they came over to North America and landed where? With their family and friends in Louisiana, which is being run by the French at the time. And then that's when we get into that. So some of the other things that I wanted to talk about were these similarities, you know, between things that we find in the ATRs and hoodoo. So I already mentioned there's the gree-gree, right? You know, we got that from one of the other ones. It's like the mojo bag itself coming from the Congo Nkisi. And then also the Ancestor stick, which I wanted to share. I'm going to bring one over because, yes, like this right here. So like something like this, you know, your Ancestor stick, which in Ifa would be known as an Egun stick. So in hoodoo, you know, with your Ancestor stick, when you go to approach your altar, you would typically knock on the ground 3 times when you're going to be working with or addressing your ancestors. You knock on the ground 3 times. Now, first of all, why do you even knock on the ground 3 times? Because originally, your ancestors, your dead, were buried under the floor, were buried underground under the living room, for example. Let's call it a living room. And so since your family was buried there, and there might be like a hole in the ground that you would, or excuse me, a hole in the floor that you would open up when you wanted to drop down offerings to feed the ancestors. And so hence when you were working with the ancestors and you wanted to address yourself before them, you would knock on the ground 3 times to wake them up and get their attention. Right?
Interesting.
Now if you don't have a stick, you know, you just knock. But with the Egum stick, that's what you would be doing. And then so hence a direct correlation, something that is clearly been passed down in the tradition of Hoodoo, is the Egum stick or the Ancestor stick, the Ancestor staff. And then hence also looking at the significance of the story of Moses battling the court sorcerers and connecting his staff with the Egum stick. Check it out.
Very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Now, did they always have, like an ancestor or whatever on top?
Depends on the person's tradition or what it is they may be
I have one of these.
guided to do.
I have one of these.
It could just be a branch,
Uh-huh.
really just a branch from a tree,
I have
and a
stick
specific kind of tree, but yeah, check it out, man.
one. Wow.
And also some of the other things that were passed down, correlates that exist, is the spiritual baths. You know, everybody knows about spiritual baths, right? So, and from the ATRs, you know, it might be called amachis. So where it is amachi amongst the ATRs or the traditions coming out of Yoruba land or Ghana, here in Hoodoo, it's a spiritual bath. So the spiritual baths being one. Even some of the soaps, you know, the spiritual soaps, as they're called, bar soaps specifically. You have those coming from these African traditional religions. And floor washes too, the same thing, which we should be doing if anyone's doing any type of cleansing, like year-end cleansing, whether you're going by the Gregorian calendar or the lunar New Year, you know, making yourself a good floor wash, you know, for cleansing the floor, the ground, your ritual space, you know, clearing that of negativities and so
Worked
on.
for me, right?
Yes.
Cinnamon floor wash. Sold my house.
Yeah, when you want to draw in some money. Yeah, or get something connected to finances, something connected to money. And then also, once you're done with that, doing some kind of floor wash or activity related to drawing in prosperity, drawing in abundance, and so forth. You know, and it doesn't even have to be money. You know, it could be an abundance of health. You know, it could be an abundance of intellect, whatever it is. If you're going to be starting school again that year, you know, it could be for drawing in wisdom. You know, maybe mixing in some Solomon seal root, you know, or some Brahmi or Gotu Kola. One of the other things is on the plantation conjure. So what may be the origin, or is the origin behind some of these workings themselves? So like, stay with me, right? Stay with me, a stay with me working, okay? Typically, you know, when people are talking about stay with me, it's to keep a lover from straying, from going elsewhere and so forth. But originally, we can look at stay with me as a working that was going to keep a family member who was in danger of being sold to being taken away to another plantation, another land, some other owner. Stay with me. A working that is going to keep this person from being taken away from you taken out of the family and put God knows where else in the world. Shut your mouth. You know, we can shut your goddamn mouth. Talking about, you know, maybe they were in danger of their plot to kill the master, to overthrow the big house. Maybe they were in danger of being ratted out. Shut your mouth work. Right?
That makes sense.
Stop snitching. Stop snitching.
Stop snitching.
No rats allowed.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because look at what you had to lose. Everything.
Yeah.
You didn't have freedom as it was. You know? Law stay away. Law stay away formulas. Law stay away magic.
Law, L-A-W?
Like
Mhm.
law enforcement?
Yeah, yeah, like law enforcement. You know, conjure work for keeping the law away. Why? For individuals, for slaves who had escaped the plantation, who had escaped the planters and so forth, and were now on the run, law stay away work allowed them to evade capture from the patrollers. So that's where that, we can see where that would come from. This person is literally on the run from the law. If they get caught, it's either death or worse. And so you have this law stay away work to ensure that this person does not get captured by the patrollers and their dogs and brought back to where they came from.
It's interesting.
Right. And it's also interesting to note that in plantation conjure, to use that term, you're not going to find